Hey everybody, welcome back, back to our second
That's
review.
Right. That's right. Welcome back.
This review is going to be covering Spider-Man Homecoming. Chris and I are both fresh off the trail from seeing this last night for opening night. This was long awaited for a lot of Marvel fans, myself included. Especially, this is one of the movies I've personally looked forward to most this year, being a Spider-Man nut myself, and just right off the bat, I can say, well, didn't disappoint.
Welcome back for the first time or the second time or welcome back. Spider-Man. Spider-Man came out yesterday. We're recording this the next day. Fun movie. Okay, so are we gonna do non-spoilers and then spoilers?
I say let's just do a pretty general talk about it. I think the very nature during the review, we're gonna let some cat out of the bag. So let's just take all the cats out the bag. Let them run loose. Okay, give them their litter.
Right, are you sure?
All
right.
I'm positive.
All right. It's out there, people, because it is very hard to talk about this movie without talking about spoilers. Because to speak of the movie as a whole, things are just going to come out. You can't keep all those kittens in the bag. So. All right, so we're just gonna talk about it. We're just gonna, there it goes.
Yeah.
All right. So first, as Ian said, we are both big Spider-Man fans of the comic, of the other movies. So some of these other ones we talk about, like Guardians of the Galaxy, where we know that that's a comic. We know some of the things from the comics. That's not the case here. We know much about the comics,
right?
Which is kind of funny because at the same time I think we favored different eras or different versions, whereas you were more, I think, of a fan of the Ultimate version, weren't you?
Exactly. The fun thing about following the Spider-Man series is you have so many continuums, or alterations that you can pull from. Spectacular, Amazing, Ultimate. We'll go on and on. 2099, etc. And I think we've seen reflections of those in some of the previous Sony-based movies we had. The films with Andrew Garfield. Of course, following the stories of Gwen Stacy a lot closer. Goblin, you had go back even further with Tobey Maguire. Of course, the classic Spider-Man 2 with Doc Ock, but all that felt a little more towards, I guess, like Spectacular Spider-Man with the slightly older Peter Parker. But here we are now.
Yeah. Well, they both felt like older Spider-Man because those actors were much, much older. Andrew Garfield being in his 30s. Tobey Maguire, I'm not sure what age I think he was in his 20s when they started, but those movies spanned several years.
They did.
So, it's hard to forget that Spider-Man 3, I think, only came out about 10 years ago or so.
Right.
So we have had a Spider-Man movie, I think, every few years now for about 15 or so years.
Yeah.
And this is the third reboot. But overall, kind of getting ahead of myself here. Overall, you really like this movie.
I did, and there are a couple of reasons I really enjoyed this. Besides, well, it's in the name, for goodness sake, for Spidey getting the MCU treatment, seeing how this ties in on a larger scale, not just to Stark Industries, but to the Avengers, to the ongoing story we've developed here. But also, I think just the right mix of Spider-Man lore. So even though we've got a bit of a reboot on our hands, it seems this is based a little closer towards the Ultimate Spider-Man continuum with while not a carbon copy, of course, Peter Parker's in high school. It's a lot younger, but we're not backtracking over the origin again. We get it by this point. Radioactive Spider, he was bitten, he gained powers.
Right.
It's already clearly established, in fact, even in a previous film. It picks up from Civil War. And in fact, I think with some good humor, it even brings that in sort of Peter Parker's perspective as he was invited by Tony Stark in Civil War to join his cause, going off of that and then dropping right back into his daily life, trying to readjust, simply just going to school he just got called to fight with the Avengers not long ago. So that was really fun. I guess seeing how all of that sort of really threw him out of whack. He's constantly waiting for the next mission, waiting for the next assignment. Something else is going to come up. It doesn't. All the momentum really slows on the superhero end. He's doing everything under the guise of internship he's pursuing with Tony Stark. It goes over with a lot of people. Some are relatively suspicious, but he maintains his cover pretty well. Through some just goofy juvenile mistakes, of course, he ends up unveiling his identity to his best friend first, and I think the gears of the rest of the movie really start kicking off from there. But I think it's important in a really cool way to base it. I feel like instead of, all right, let's reset, coming in, who is this? Reestablish Spider-Man is like we're very, very strongly right off the bat. We're right back in the running with where we were, and that's great. It really feels like this fits like a glove.
I get where you're coming from now, dude. You are like milk sitting out of the fridge. You're spoiling so much. You are wanting to dig into this. All right, here's a couple things I did not get to say. As you are more of an Ultimate Spider-Man fan, I am a fan of the vanilla Spider-Man. I'd say more of the 616 universe Spider-Man. Although I am a big fan of the 2099 version as well, but that really has nothing to do with this. Whereas we're talking about different iterations of the same character. That's a completely different character,
right?
Okay, but yeah, this is definitely. I think it would be safe to say that as much as this movie draws from its own original content, it draws as much, at least from inspirations from the Ultimate Universe.
Yeah.
Would you think that would be a safe statement to say?
It's hard to, because while I want to, it's so strongly based in the canon that MCU's kind of built on its own.
Right, and it kind of has to after 10 years. I mean, you can't look at this movie without getting slapped in the face with the MCU, which is fine because they at the same time they don't overdo it. One of the biggest concerns was, oh my God, this is basically Iron Man 4, and it's not.
It is not. It's not at all. That's why I will run with what you're saying. It's stylistically and aesthetically, yes, a major trait of things that you'd see included in the Ultimate Universe, especially like the Ultimate villains, were, they weren't always as soft-flavored and vanilla and predictable. For example, you had Goblin. Okay, what do we get with the Goblin? Green Goblin or Hobgoblin? The Goblin and a glider and some bombs, right? And then, whereas in the Ultimate series, when these villains are introduced, usually they had an edge to them. They not only had all their powers or things that you usually assume they'd have with them, but they either had some really bad mental tweak, or they seemed to be amped up about 20 times stronger than you might remember them. Like, Green Goblin was extremely powerful in the Ultimate series. Venom was very twisted. And even here, looking at the current villain we have, the way they did it, especially with the amount of additional tech he has, I think amps him up a few degrees. You might remember in the classic comic. So, in that regard, yeah.
I was going to comment in Ultimate Marvel. Didn't Venom ends up becoming a superhero at one point, doesn't he? He connects to Flash Thompson and becomes Agent Venom. Isn't that in the Ultimate Universe?
I think so. Because I know in the Ultimate Spider-Man comic itself, he kind of ran into an untimely end. There was that whole strange arc about how Eddie Brock's parents knew Peter Parker's parents, especially his father, and they worked together. They were trying to create a cure for cancer, and then they had that mess that came out of it, but.
Right, that's right. Venom's not even from space in the Ultimate Universe, if I remember correctly.
No, that's all homegrown. It was meant to be a self-recuperating suit to get rid of carcinogenic agents and like diseases, but that was a mess.
Well, and I don't think we'll see any of that in this one either. I don't know. So it seems like the origins of Venom are going to be completely different moving ahead for that Venom movie. But anyways, we're way off track here. Okay, so let's talk about, let's just say it, some of our favorite things about this movie. Since we are in spoiler zone from start to finish, let's just do it. What are some of name 3 of your favorite things about this movie?
Oh man, I'd have to say number 1, the integration of Spider-Man and his powers with Tony Stark's tech. Really fun thing to see. The suit itself has always been sort of a side accessory for Spider-Man, and of course to mask his identity and everything else, and house the web shooters. And depending on iteration, you could point at the underarm like web gliders and whatnot, and just a few different things. But here, just the way the suit merged with his own strengths, his own powers, or didn't merge when he was trying to figure it out. I love that. Go ahead.
Go ahead. Go for it.
No. I think it really lent this edge to making Spider-Man really, really flexible in terms of his powers, abilities. Things like impact web parachute, and the rest of it. Those were things that he learned over a long season amount of time in most of the comics.
Right.
Whereas here, he's gaining access to those really powerful abilities or tricks with his web because of technology. That puts a lot at his fingertips.
I was going to say that it's kind of interesting how they do bridge that gap, because he is still very much young Spider-Man,
Right.
And he has all these gadgets now that he has nowadays in the modern era.
Right.
So it's an interesting and cool way to bridge that. Yeah, at the same time, I that's actually one of the things I wasn't a big fan of. Although it is at the same time very cool to see his costume, see kind of an origin costume versus his modern costume.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the few things I like. The whole thing with the AI in the suit and all that, that's very interesting. I wasn't a big fan of that, though. I think the suit itself is cool. I think they went a little too far with it overall. And not that I don't want him to have all those abilities, but it felt like it was a little bit too much of the story.
Right.
And one of the abilities that he is missing, they either reference it or they bring it up. Oddly enough, in this movie, we see the weakest to almost no reference to it at all, which is the spider sense.
Yeah, that's true.
Now we did see a really good example of that in Civil War.
Oh yeah.
But I don't remember even really seeing it in this movie. Now, I'm going to go see this a second time. But, I mean, that in my opinion, is one of, if not his most powerful ability.
It is. This is actually one I'd like to revisit as well. It would be difficult, I think, to write in how to amp up Spider Sense, because it is what it is. One of the compelling things about Spider-Man movies, and what's always made some of the best scenes, in my opinion, is just simply his awareness of the moment, of his surroundings, of the environment, of everything else, and how he can, with pinpoint precision, execute crazy maneuvers in almost any environment. So we really don't get that here. There's no real crazy bullet time moments or anything like that, or really any crazy, narrow knife, razor edge, spider sense moments, which was kind of odd. That's something I've grown to expect, but it's just sort of that awareness is just generally incorporated in. I think that ties into things happening at such a faster pace. The closest two moments I can think of would even be how quickly he reacts. This I'm jumping way ahead. How quickly he reacts later on to causing that web jam with that plane turbine. And about 3 or 4 times, nearly completely losing his grip and getting blown off that jet, but still maintaining his balance. And it's where all of it's sort of happening at such a speed where we don't have that moment to kind of step back, get in our protagonist's mind, see what he sees just for a second, and then go back into the main bout of action. It's sort of, we're always from that outside perspective now.
I would like to, and maybe we won't get something. I mean, I wasn't a big fan of the special effect that we got in the Sam Raimi movies, the Spider-Man Sam Raimi movies, when the spider sense would come into effect, but maybe some kind of audio cue. I don't know. At the very least, some kind of explanation in the future as to whether that really exists or not. I do think that there should be an explanation for that. But in Civil War, we saw a couple instances where it's like, okay, obviously he's aware of this because of his spider sense. I didn't really see too much of that in this one. Not, it's kind of nitpicking there, not a big deal.
Right.
I'd say one of my favorite things, not my favorite thing, is the Vulture.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, how do you take one of the lamest villains and make them awesome, and at the same time keep them in the roots of the character and make sense? This is how you do it.
Amen to that. Very, very well done. And I love it. I'm not going to jump to my second although it is related to him. But this is really important here. Vulture, in almost every incarnation we've seen, is normally he's a very sick character. There's some kind of health reason he's doing what he does, or for someone else to try to solve a problem like that. But he was never really a villain you put on your watch list, like a Carnage or like a Doc Ock or anything like that. I know Vulture, in my mind, I kind of localize him with the early Spider-Man comics even. He's
definitely.
Yeah, pretty simple, pretty straightforward and whatnot. And he's never had prominent roles, but completely basing him in technology here, and then with his backstory as to why he's doing what he's doing, really sort of brings in flashes of some of the things I enjoyed about Doc Ock most back in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 2 film. Well done, taking a classic villain and showing in the face of a desperate plight, getting pushed out of work, out of family, out of life, those he loves, those he cares about, what's someone to do, how they react. And he is a man who takes high advantage of his opportunities, of his situation, and he uses it, and he exploits it to the best of his degree.
This is, it's kind of funny because at the same time, this is one of their bigger failings, the MCU movies as a whole, which are the villains. I don't think that's the case in this one at all. This was a strong villain. I mean, as much as this is, people are worried about this being Iron Man 4, this is a Spider-Man movie. This is also, in many ways, a Vulture movie.
It is.
We start out seeing the Vulture before we even see Spider-Man. It's how it starts and it's how it ends. It's actually the first of the two after credit scenes. You have a great arc for this character, and just obviously, I mean, Michael Keaton just nails it. He
does.
Makes this role. He makes this his character, and I can't really think of any others who would have been able to pull that off the way that he does. It's great character. The story behind him makes sense. What he's doing makes sense. Why he's doing things the way he's doing them. That being said, I'll even talk a little bit of a con now.
Yeah.
Shocker gets completely punked out.
Yeah.
We're told Shocker's in this movie, and he is. Two of them even. Come on, at least put him in some kind of costume or something. And those who don't know, I mean, that you have the Tinkerer in there as well, who actually gets more time and at least more up front about him and his abilities than even Shocker does.
It's really funny with Shocker. I feel Marvel really set us up with a couple of jabs here and just gave you the hook. We hear about Shocker, and naturally everyone starts thinking, okay, what extended role will he have? How many portions is he going to appear in? Is he set up later? But he just gets shut down hard. And I think it's funny because Shocker's pretty much a 2-bit crook. I mean, in the most iterations anyway, he gets hold to a bit of tech. He isn't the brightest in the box anyway, and he always goes about trying to do some kind of lame scheme and gets busted for it. But the speed at which he gets shut down in this one, as you said, 2 Shockers, is hilarious.
Well, now that I bring that up, I don't think we even saw what happens to the Tinker. Did we see what happens to the Shocker? I think no. I don't think we get a resolve to that, do we?
No, he's just. I mean, it's just assumed he's imprisoned because he gets webbed before the Avengers plane scene. But that's it.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, but we never see what happened to Tinker.
No, we didn't.
Well, that's kind of interesting. He's still out there doing whatever he's doing. In fact, we don't get much to resolve as to what happens to all that stuff that Vultures get going on.
Well, right, that's important. I mean, there was never a raid unless Vulture himself talked about it, which I doubt. There's never a raid to shut down that compound, his facility, to confiscate everything else back. I mean, you can make some assumptions, some inferences if you want, but I'm hoping they save some of that ammo for next time.
We don't actually see it.
Right.
Interesting. Maybe that's being held open for something else, or maybe it is a hole in the plot. We do obviously see the Vulture in prison. It is in, like I said, one of the after credit scenes. But who, by the way, did you know that character he's talking to there is Scorpion?
No, is it?
It is, and I didn't know that either. I had to look that up. I thought it was, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that's Scorpion right there. So since we're jumping all over the frickin' place, what did you think of the fact that at the end there, Vulture does not rat out Spider-Man and tell him that he knows who Spider-Man is? What do you think of that?
Plays more into his character, and this is actually leading to my second point here. I think I should actually preface it with this. If I'm picking 3 things that I love, my second was the blue collar element. And I want to build this. I'll build this back into Vulture and back into what we were talking about with Scorpion too. In large part, Spider-Man, I think what always made him such a cool superhero was he was always into the plight of the people. It was never as much about the rich corporate goers at the top and what he could do for the 1 or 2%, but helping out the everyday person. Hey, it's the good old adage, the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, right? That always lent him more towards of that blue collar hero. He was always one that could identify and empathize because he is / was one of those people himself. Playing into that though, you look at this parody along with Vulture, and I mean, while Peter's not, his straits aren't as desperate as Vulture says. There's people like him, people like Peter. They have a certain lot, and what they do with it is their choice. Whether how they protect those around them, their families, their friends, how they survive, what they do in the world. They use the hand that they've been given to a large part, and in the same hand with that, I think Vulture, through all his dealings, he values loyalty. He values those close to him a lot, but I think he has a sense of honor, but that comes from trust that's earned. Everyone close to him and everybody around him, even if they are just a 2-bit thug, it's because they've been involved with his businesses. They've been partnered with him. They work with him to build everything he set up. And I think he comes to a genuine respect for Peter because he's willing to, even despite warning, stick to his convictions, even if that means his life, even if that could cost him that, he does that and he follows that through. And I think there's a part of him that really genuinely deeply respects that, and he stays true to his character that way. And I think that puts a freaking awesome edge on him.
No, I agree. I think one of the best things this movie does is that they do put these conflicting viewpoints, these conflicting roles, as similar as they may seem at times. They put these they put these as I say that again.
I'm with you.
They are on a collision course, and the conflict isn't, but he's just doing what he's got to do for his family and for himself to use what's been given to him to make a living. That's not the conflict.
Right. The
conflict is there's no question of right or wrong. There's a question of morality, but it's not in the what's the gray line, what's the gray area, what's the line, what do you cross, what do you don't. It's like, look, this is what you're doing. You're explaining why you're doing it. This is what you're doing, though.
Yep.
I have to do something about that. It's a very common conflict played out in a different way. Nobody had to be told or explained, the struggle.
Yep.
These are this is what I'm doing. This is the reasons why. This is what I'm doing. These are the reasons why. Okay, let's butt heads. And we focused on the context of that instead of, I sympathize for him, and no, none of that.
Right. And that's part of, I think, what makes that narrative compelling, and why the types of conflicts you run into here, Spider-Man, Vulture, whatever else, why they feel right, why they feel organic. You're not, this stuff isn't spoon-fed to you. It's not forced, or it doesn't come across in a corny way. The audience is free to sort of build those bridges within your mind, and you get it. It's not hard to connect the dots from point A to point B to point C, and it's likable stuff.
Action, consequence, and it all made a lot of sense. And yeah, like you said, they didn't have to force feed any of it to us. They didn't have to walk us down a path to understand what was going on. You pretty much understood everything that was going on and why it was happening. Maybe you agreed with the consequences of certain actions, or maybe you didn't, but they are what they are. And that's an interesting way to tell a story, because honestly, I mean, you go back to even 10 years ago, and especially 20 years ago in the 90s, that's all superhero movies were. It's all about the gray. It's all about, doing this and what it means. I mean, the Sam Raimi movies were all about wallowing in the repercussions of being Spider-Man.
Yep.
And how upsetting it was. It's like, no, you still felt that because that conflict's there, but you felt the repercussions of it without having to deal with all the emo crud.
Amen to that.
And don't get me wrong, the emo crud's good.
Yeah.
But this is where a lot of people are like, well, how are they going to do this? How are they going to reboot Spider-Man again? How are they going to continue to tell this story without us, having to drag through it for, this would be a 6th time.
Yeah.
And this is how you do it. You tell the story without having to tell the parts that have already been told.
Which largely brings me to the third thing I enjoyed most, if I can say about this overall. It's fun to be Spider-Man. we've had this story delivered in such a way where you've been able to build it without going through the grit, going through the dirt, or like the super low times. It's sort of, that stuff's kind of, it's pushed to the side. You have a very clear, coherent narrative in the story. And I think at the same time, you're free to enjoy those finer points, but also see, really just how fun it is and how crazy this whole experience he's going through can be. Like the possibilities. Instead of, I think, fumbling through the awkwardness of, well, okay, how did I get these powers? What do I do? Oh my gosh, everything's changing. It's, all right, well, hey, this is my life. This is what I do. This is what I have. How do I use it? Or like, when do I use it? A good example, there's a slight conflict at the homecoming party, not the homecoming party, I'm sorry, the early dance parties, whether or not he should, come and make an appearance as Spider-Man to put a plug in for Peter Parker, leave, and then return again as Peter Parker. And he just kind of goes to these mental gymnastics about it, and just eventually says, this is dumb. Something else comes up, his attention's diverted. But still, it really lends to the fact that he immensely enjoys this while he sees the imminent danger in it as well. There's a lot that still freaks and buzzes him out about it, like, well, crap, they were just trying to kill me with this alien weapon and everything, but then the next frame in the same hand, he's being classic Spider-Man. The jokes, the stupid humor, just irritating the living hell out of anybody he's fighting. I think that's one of the things I've always loved most, and I think those high moments, they make you smile. They'll give you a chuckle with those, but if anything, the suspenseful moments will put you in suspense too.
So, elaborating on a different section of that, this I think is the most Spider-Man-esque Spider-Man we've had.
Yeah.
At least when it comes to the action, when it comes to Spider-Man being Spider-Man, and I think that's what a lot of people got excited about when we saw what we did in Civil War,
right?
And they definitely expanded on that. That's it's like it's not talking about that's Peter Parker. It's like no, that's Spider-Man doing Spider-Man stuff. Being Spider-Man, and that's what you got. You got that all over the place in this movie. Even as the newbie stumbling around, doesn't quite understand how to use all of his powers and all the tricks that the suit gives. It's still Spider-Man being Spider-Man, and that's I think at the heart of that that's what we were hoping for. That's what we got. Some people are saying that the action's a little scarce. I disagree. I think we've got just enough.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's fun like that. You've got a great looking Spider-Man doing awesome Spider-Man stuff with Spider-Man things, and the action with him is fantastic.
It is. I think right at the start, even with the Civil War openings, as he's taking that video documentary experience of the whole thing, and he's waiting for the call from Tony Stark to actually hop in. And he does. He's like, oh, hold on a minute. He just puts down his phone and it still has that view. He just flips over, grabs Captain. Yep. When he grabbed Cap's shield, like I really chuckled at that. And then that's sort of repeated. I guess just the feel of that throughout all of it. The Washington Monument scene was great too. It was the right mix of I think suspense and also goofiness. Mm-hmm. But it lives up to all those things. It was very much what I was hoping for, what I was expecting. That I think it delivered very, very well. One thing I'm questioning a little bit, I'm looking at this might be more towards the con side, is at this point in MCU, at this point where we are bringing in Spider-Man and everything else, and you look at the decision that he makes into the film, especially to disavow Tony Stark's offer. He's offered a brand new suit, join the party of Avengers. He says no, on the basis of, let me spend some more time, around what I know, protecting the little guy, around New York, whatnot. Right. And, I found this really interesting for two reasons. One is it shows that there's a lot he still has to learn when sort of pulled out of that smaller pool of New York into something broader. His first experience in that was in Civil War. Of course, that's going to continue in Avengers and everything else. He's going to continually be exposed to, and he's receiving a lot of growth through that. But the thing I wonder is, how much time does he have for that now? All considered, we're not. It's not like we're at the beginning of MCU. We're going to be talking about Avengers soon
I
as
think he has until May of next year.
I mean, if you want to follow timeline like that, it's just I thought that was a really interesting transition because majority of the time you hear a decision like that and that instantly leads, okay, there's going to be a next movie. And maybe you'll have that next movie to pre-buff or whatever big event, but not in this case. We're not going to see that second sequel follow-up until after Infinity War. So, what I'm thinking, as much of a quote-unquote weakness that could be, or a critique that, can he really afford to do that? Does this just not link to the rest of MCU? Well, he may not even well have a choice. Infinity War is going to affect everything that we know so much to such a profound degree that he's not going to get that call. It's like, hey, look, you want to just work in New York, you want to protect your side of the pond, that's great, but I don't think you're going to get a choice in it.
Well, so we're going to talk more about this on our show, Jagged Edge, for this week's show. We're going to talk about this, but we'll bring it up here a little bit because you're talking about the evolution of the character now and where is that going to go. And so we get, with the current contract that Marvel has with Sony, kind of funny, the contract they have for their own character, but we don't need to know all that. They've got 5 movies: Civil War, Homecoming, Avengers, Infinity War, Avengers 4, and then Homecoming 2, or whatever that ends up being called. So the next 2 movies we're going to see him in are the Avenger movies. And we already know that the first one, he's going to be in it about as much as he was in Civil War. So we're not going to see much.
Right.
We don't know how much we're going to see in Avengers Part 4, the 4th movie. We don't know that, but we did just find out. We're going to talk about this on the show this week. Kevin Feige did say that Spider-Man Homecoming 2, or whatever that movie ends up, his second solo movie happens literally minutes after the aftermath of Avengers 4.
Ah, man.
And comes out 2 months after. So, and he did say in an interview that these 5 movies, starting from Civil War going till that one, is his current larger story arc.
Good stuff.
And that's within 2 years' time. Now, Marvel more and more has been moving away from their normal timeline, which is that movies tend to happen around the time that they are actually released in real life. They've been moving away from that more and more. You saw it a little bit in this movie. You definitely saw it in Guardians of the Galaxy 2, which takes place 3 years before it was actually released. We're starting to see more and more of that, so we'll see how that timeline works out. But if it does, then he's practically out of high school.
Yeah.
And so maybe we're not seeing too much of Peter Parker in high school like we were supposed to, because we're supposed to hear a whole bunch of that. Or we hear that that's supposed to be a whole bunch of a lot of the focus of Peter Parker. So we'll see. We'll see how they play that all out. Marvel's really good at keeping the continuity going with all their stuff. We'll see though. But that's a good segue into a part of the movie we really haven't talked about, which is Peter Parker and high school. How did you think this all played out?
Yeah, the concern here with this part of it is you could lean way too heavily on the school elements and really lose the rest of the film, or vice versa, sort of just leave the high school portion just a backdrop, but then have everything Spider-Man related mainly. There's still a lot of the same consequence-related behavior that happens. I mean, of course, school, the extracurricular stuff he wants to do, everything keeps taking a backseat to what he's trying to do with building his career as Spider-Man,
and the consequences that come from that,
and the consequences that come from it, exactly. I think it presented itself without being overwrought, which I did appreciate. The fun dynamic about not just this but Spider-Man films is normal life stuff, high school and all that it will keep happening. It goes on, and it often is going on a concurrent path than what Peter Parker's actually doing, and he's sort of jumping on and off this train. It just so happens every time he tends to jump back on his normal life train, he's usually way behind, or he's usually thrown off of something else, and he has to take these periods to get caught back up with everything, because it just starts to turn into a mess. I think that idea, though, I think that on-off relationship works. I didn't feel that, especially with his basing in love interest, crashed as heavily into the story as it did in the past. I felt other previous Spider-Man flicks and other elements of the stories always had like a giant Mary Jane stamp or like Gwen Stacy stamp, and it was just, it's there, but it was so permeable that it was hard to see other stuff around it.
You know, let me comment on that real quick, though.
Yeah.
Because while neither of those characters dominated the movie at all, in fact, one of them wasn't even present.
Right.
The other one, this is one of the big things that overshadowed this movie going into it was that, what's her name, Zenaida or whatever?
Yeah.
Plays Michelle in the movie. Everyone always thought that was going to be Mary Jane. And
right.
They're like, no, that's Michelle. And then you find out at the end of the movie that is Mary Jane. What did you think of that? What camp are? Well, first of all, what camp are you initially in?
I was in the first camp. About like no, that's Michelle. Like it doesn't have anything that
Okay, so you actually didn't think that was going to be MJ? Mary Jane.
I did not.
What did you think, and what happened in the theater when they really showed that? Yeah, that is Mary Jane.
I was surprised, and I guess the reason being was the way. It's just the way she's set up, and it was a welcome surprise. Mm-hmm. Mary Jane has always had this shtick of instant popularity, instant success, always the spotlight on her. Everybody's casting the idol eye. None of that. If anything, she's sort of more of a reclusive character.
No, she's the outcast. She's the person who goes to detention because she likes to draw people.
Yeah, exactly. She has this just blindingly fun, awkward feel about her, and I thought that was really refreshing. In fact, it's one of the first times I've seen one of the main Spider-Man characters who doesn't associate with superpowers or anything having an introduction like that. Most Spider-Man Continuum lore has this way of introducing these characters with at least a lot of their traits intact. Even if we're talking about a different timeline or different universe or whatever, there's certain attributes that follow. In this case, they did not.
I was of the camp of, she probably is going to be Mary Jane, but I don't care. Out of all the arguments of them changing genders or races of characters being main characters or existing characters in these movies, this one I actually felt was a bit strongest because I really do get where people are coming from. Look, Mary Jane's physical appearance is a big part of the character. It actually really is. She's a model. She's an actress. She's got the whole red hair, kind of paler skin, fair kind of skin to her. I actually kind of got, okay, this actually does play an integral part into this character.
It does.
But the fact that they did change this character in such a drastic way. And they didn't actually call her Mary Jane at the end. They called her MJ.
Right.
It's basically, look, this isn't Mary Jane, but this is that character in this Peter Parker's life. And I think they did it I guess for maybe the broad consumption of it in an acceptable way. I didn't really have a problem with it to begin with. I think, now that we've seen so many different versions, not just in these movies, but in the comics as well, we've seen so many different versions of these characters.
Right.
I'm actually happy to see them go off the beaten path on this one. Does bother me to this day, though, that Gwen Stacy, at least in the Sam Raimi movies, and so far in this one, is playing such a small role.
Yeah.
Obviously a much larger role, and one of the few things I really liked about the Andrew Garfield version is that Gwen Stacy is a prominent role where she should be. I've been a Gwen Stacy fan over an MJ fan, so
yeah, and fair enough. I could see it. I think just for the sake of variety, there was a time where I went more towards the Gwen Stacy side myself, but no, overall this change was really welcome. Again, I don't know how much they continue this with others. For example, if you really want to spin Eddie Brock, for example, in such a different way, even though I doubt they're even going to touch him in these.
We didn't get an Eddie Brock.
No, we didn't, and it's not much of a surprise. Eddie's been various things. He's been older classmate to fellow reporter to fellow photographer. But he's usually always some kind of really loose associate. Somehow, right. Or he's got some loose relation, but that's okay. Room for later. And besides, we're going to be getting that Venom film. So
we did get a Flash Thompson, who, in my opinion, was the weakest character of the whole movie.
Yeah, it's funny about Flash because he tries so hard.
How is Flash, the rich kid, the jock kid, and the nerd on the debate team at the same time.
Yeah.
That is ridiculous. And I'm not saying that person can't exist, and probably does in various high schools, but I'm sure that's very rare. Do you remember anyone like that growing up?
Oh, all three? Like, no.
Yeah. That was pretty weak. That's probably one of the bigger, and again, that's nitpicking, but that is probably one of the bigger flaws of the movie. By the way, and I just realized this talking about this with you, did you realize no photographer Peter Parker? I mean, we saw him shooting a video on his phone, but no photographer Peter Parker, no Daily Bugle.
Right. No, for sure. I
didn't even realize that until just now.
No, that, and I'm completely fine with that. I think that's something that heavily feels like it borrows from the Ultimate Universe. I know we pointed at that a few times during this talk, but again, that was something that really wasn't just part of his life at the time. He was busy with school and everything else. He had an interest in photography, maybe took up an internship here and there, or just visiting the Daily Bugle and whatnot. But he wasn't involved in a career or anything, and that's fine. I think this is early enough to kind of divorce that side of his life and sort of leave that kind of career out. It works. I'm cool with it.
Okay, so I think I might miss it. I think I might miss it a little bit. I always thought, I guess from, I don't know, digital artist myself and someone who majored in video production, I kind of miss that a little bit. I get that artsy side. We're not seeing an artsy side. We're seeing all the other elements, but we're not seeing that. And I don't know. I don't know if I'm okay with that or not. We'll see. I mean, it's still only the first movie, but we're not even seeing an interest in photography outside of that initial video that he takes at the beginning of the movie, which everybody does. That's not even a photographer kind of thing anymore. So yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm kind of in the fuck that camp right now.
You want it back?
Yeah, I do. I think I want it back. Okay, so I would have to say the biggest surprise of the movie was right at the very end, literally the last seconds. Something they've toyed with in the comics, they've never toyed with in the movies, but they definitely left us on the cliffhanger where Aunt May sees him in Spider-Man, in the Spider-Man suit.
Yes. Wow. Absolutely yes. Oh my gosh.
And not just seeing like a guy in Spider-Man suit, like, is that Peter? She sees him take it off.
Yep.
Take off the mask. And then they stop her by saying, "No." She says, "What the?" and cuts it off right at the F. That's interesting. That's in now. This I think I'm okay with this angle.
And I am too. Rarely ever, and I know I'm going to miss some here, or somewhere this was revealed. Rarely ever has Aunt May even had privy to that. I know she found out in Ultimate Spider-Man way too late. That was like when he had died. Like then then she had at the very last instant. But it's funny, Aunt May is usually portrayed as kind of bumbling, kind of naive and everything. But while this Aunt May has her naivete, she's tuned into Peter enough to know that look, there's some stuff going on. I don't know exactly what it is, but there are things happening behind the scenes that I don't know fully about. But, even then, she kind of excuses it, because she says, you know what, I used to sneak out when I was a kid. I used to do stuff like that. Whatever you're doing, you know what, be safe, and just let me know you're all right. But this kind of took it to the next stage. I think this would have been the last thing she would have thought was the cause of his absences, his disappearances. Now that she knows, and there's that whole can of worms, I'm going to be very interested to see that fall out in the next film or whatever else.
I think we're definitely going to have. We're definitely going to see Peter asking permission to go out and save the world in this place. This is going to be interesting. We've not seen this, and I with this, I think I like and agree more with the fact that they went with a very different direction with Aunt May. Not to mention the fact, no play on the fact that Aunt May is typically a very old and a much older character. The Aunt May character is very old. It's very tired. It's a very tired character in these movies, at least. Right. And now the Sam Raimi versions had a great Aunt May, and she kind of played it just a little bit. Maybe she knows he's Spider-Man. Maybe she doesn't. They very played off it a little bit. But we were dealing with an adult Spider-Man at that point.
Right.
So, Yeah, it was interesting. I can't wait to see how they play with that. I You can't say this with many people, especially nowadays when we see such disasters like the last Alien movie, Covenant being as bad as it is. You can't rely on movie producers or just creators. I trust MCU overall.
Same.
I trust what Kevin Feige does. And when you do something as drastic as all the changes they made in this movie, maybe even I don't like all of them, but I trust them.
Yeah, and I think they've earned that at this point, as far as the direction they're going, and at the very least, earn the right to say, "Hey, you got questions, or you don't know how this is going to turn out, or you're really bugged out about it. Wait till the next sequel, or wait till Infinity Wars."
Yeah. So it's going to be a couple of years until we get the next Spider-Man solo movie, but we will see him again next year, at least a little bit,
in some capacity. But hey, best we got. I'm with you. I think they have Marvel and what they have built. There's enough clout earned here to at least give that patience and give time. So we'll see.
So finally, Iron Man. Now we talked about this a little bit. Do you think not enough? Too much?
Oh, just right. Just right. Just the right dash of Stark. It works. I thought I read something about Robert Downey Jr. not having heavy amounts of availability when all this is being filmed. In fact, one of those worked out really well when he literally calls in while Peter's out on that steamliner.
That was funny.
It's just right to show he's on the fringes of this. He has an eye on everything that's happening, but he's not trying to intervene at every section, at every turn, and to try to steer every part of the wheel. He's giving him this. He's letting this play out, and he wants to see where that goes. But I think there's just the right balance of his appearance, just the right balance of mentorship, but he doesn't tip his world.
Well, and so we had a big surprise in this movie near the end, not Spider-Man related. Pepper Potts is back.
Yeah, it's man. I mean, the last we saw, there was a bit of division. Stark, what he decided to do with his company, with Pepper becoming the acting CEO of it. They've had a bit of a contentious, on and off relationship.
Right. In Civil War they had full on broken up, and she wasn't a part of his life anymore, and he was actually in kind of a dark place because of it.
Yeah, and seeing that reversed, I said, well, okay, wow, she's just as fiery as Stark is, All right. So,
I guess I'm okay with that. I'm not a big fan of what the MCU's done with Pepper Potts. They've really mangled this character through the Iron Man trilogy. Yeah. I mean, she was once ridiculously powerful and was on the verge of exploding because of I forget what it was, but basically what they were doing to people. Yeah, the extremist thing. Yeah. Which then at the end is like, oh, poof, gone. And also the Iron Man's his reactor in his chest, poof, gone. It's
yep.
Like, wow. Right. We didn't need to watch these movies at all.
Oh man, there you go.
It's just gone. There we go. Hey, go to China, get it surgically removed. Okay, there it is. But so I don't. All right, whatever. The amount of Pepper Potts we got in this movie, as long as that's the amount that we continue to get, I think I'm okay with it.
Yeah, same. And I think there's a bit of a danger at this point, as you said, with all the mangling and interjecting of the more you have her very prominently front and center. I think you really risk kind of tipping that tightrope balance. Having her, knowing her role, knowing what she's doing with Stark Industries, knowing what she's playing, maybe her relation to Tony Stark and the other. I think that's fine. I think that's enough, and we can move on.
So a couple of other interesting things, MCU related, not so much Spider-Man related. Was I the only one, or was it you two who, when we did finally see the new Avengers headquarters and you see the Quinjet taking off, and you're just like, just one more second, I want to see who was in that.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I knew they weren't going to show us who the actual Avengers were. They're going to leave it very ambiguous until we get to Infinity Wars. The only few things I've heard is that Kevin Feige has said that there has been no resolution for what happened in Civil War. So, and we got a little bit of that too when the guy says that, this is the public service announcement from Captain America. It's like, I think he's a war criminal now.
Yeah, whatever. I love that. He's like, whatever, we're required by state to play these.
But that was like that. I see the Quinjet going off. I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Who's in there?
Yeah. There's still a lot of questions about how that fracture it can be, if it will be mended, and what will happen. I mean, some capacity they got to do something. I mean, you want to deal with Thanos. I mean, have fun with that. But
yeah, you're gonna have to put this petty squabbling aside to help each other out here.
Yeah,
that would have been fun though. I think we're missing an interesting backstory, and now we're kind of going away from the Spider-Man movie. But this is one thing that bothered me about Civil War was we see Captain America at the end. He's going to break him out of that prison. I forget what it's called, right on the middle of the ocean. He's about to break him out.
Right.
You know they've been broken out. They're not in prison anymore.
Oh, yeah.
But I think there could have been a really interesting story between Civil War and then Infinity War that we're just not going to see.
Right.
What that's called, the Hidden Avengers, from the comics. I think
right. No, good point. Yeah, I'm not sure what they can do with that plot line at this point, but yeah, that kind of begged for it, didn't it? I mean, there's a lot you can build in between. I think that prep time to sort of make that bridge and that gap, but I mean, they're going to do it a different way, obviously, and then I think we're gonna have to wait till Thor Ragnarok and some of the rest to tell us the rest of that story. But hey, save some of that. Let's bridge that over into our show. Okay. And pull people on over to that. But
all right, so let's rate it out of 1 to 10. What do we use? Web shooters. 1 to 10 web shooters. What would you rate it?
I'm gonna pack 9 of those web shooters on.
Whoa! All right,
I enjoyed it.
I've been trying to decide this. I think I've been between an 8 and a 9. I haven't been able to decide. I think I'm gonna go 8.5.
Fair enough. Take that sawed off web shooter. Throw the other half in the trash can.
That's all right. Or maybe that's the half that I'm still working in science class to make, which was hilarious.
Yeah.
So the George is trying to make his web fluid. That was pretty funny. Which, by the way, one thing that we didn't talk about overall was comedy in this movie. I think it worked really well. I think as far as the comedic value, this one worked really well. I think it was more integrated into the story than even Guardians of the Galaxy, which was hilarious. I'm talking about Volume 2. Everybody had some great lines. Comedy went really well here, but overall, I think as far as the quality of the comedy, I think it's one of the best.
It is
that Marvel's done.
And the comedy in two forms. One of the lines, how much punch, how much poignant those were. But I gotta think a lot of the cinematography here and the camera work. A perfect example is, your eye is led into one section of a shot, and then once you see the whole section of that shot and what's actually happening, that's when the comedy sets in. I think right at the beginning when he accidentally unveils his identity to his best friend, of course the Aunt May scene you pointed at, many others, all of those scenes had something larger happening outside of what we could see at first. But it's such a small film element to do, but I think that it added so much. So
some of the people ask for darker, more serious movies. I mean, there's plenty of content in these MCU movies that I think touches on that. But I guess they want things that are maybe a little less lighthearted in some areas.
Right.
If you are one of those fans of those kind of comic book movies, maybe you're not going to like this so much. But if you're a fan of how Marvel does comedy, how Marvel does bright, colorful, action-oriented, funny moments, if you like those part of the MCU movies, you are going to love this movie. This is not a Logan-esque movie. This is an MCU movie through and through.
Amen to that. So,
all right.
We recommend it. Hey, if you can get out to see this one, I recommend you check it out ASAP. Not too sure.
I will go see it again tomorrow.
All right. You're already on it. Faster than I am. Shoot. I'll see if I can pull out again to catch a second showing of it. But hey, please enjoy. I hope you guys get out to see this one, and of course, be sure to check out our next show that's going to be following on the heels of this discussion. Of course, we'll make a note of this review, this video as well, in case you wanted to tell somebody else or link back to that. But till then, we'll catch you guys after the jump. Thank you so much for tuning in, and you have a good weekend.
See you later.